At 28 years old, my name is Emily Wilson, and I believed I had finally constructed a life that would earn my parents' pride. A recent promotion to creative director at a leading Boston design firm felt like a significant milestone. I eagerly anticipated sharing this success over Christmas dinner, imagining a moment of long-awaited validation. That anticipation shattered when my mother's voice, sharp and cold, delivered an unexpected blow. I'll never forget. "Don't come for Christmas, Emily. We'll just pretend we don't know you." Unbeknownst to them, this rejection wouldn't break me. I had something entirely different in mind. But before detailing what unfolded next, let me take you back through the journey that led me to transform a deeply painful dismissal into something beautiful, ultimately altering everything. Our Victorian-style home in Mapleton, Michigan, presented a picturesque facade to the outside world. Its meticulously kept garden even garnered features in the local paper's historical homes tour, twice. Inside this seemingly idyllic setting lived my parents, Margaret and Robert Wilson, pillars of the community. My father managed the most successful law practice in town, while my mother devoted herself to church committees and headed the local historical society. Their lives were meticulously built upon appearances, tradition, and meeting societal expectations. I learned early that their affection came with stipulations. From the moment I first grasped a crayon, I was captivated by color and form. Yet, my parents consistently steered me towards flashcards and educational toys, dismissing my artistic leanings. Their refrain, "Art is a hobby, Emily, not a future," became a familiar mantra, echoing in my ears from the age of 8 when I proudly displayed a painting my elementary teacher had featured in the school showcase. The disparity in how they treated my brother, Michael, born 4 years after me, became increasingly difficult to ignore. Michael was inherently logical, methodical, and naturally gravitated toward the subjects my parents esteemed. He adhered to their unspoken rules, excelled in debate in middle school, and declared his intention to follow our father into law. His every achievement was celebrated with celebratory dinners at the town's finest restaurant. My victories in art competitions, on the other hand, were met with strained smiles and dismissive remarks like, "That's nice, dear, but how are your math grades looking?" The most significant conflict arose during my final year of high school. Despite possessing the academic credentials to pursue any major, I chose to apply to art schools rather than pre-law programs. The arguments spanned weeks. "You're throwing your life away on doodles," my father once roared during a particularly heated dinner, asserting, "We didn't raise you to be impractical." My mother's disappointment was quieter, more subtle, but equally devastating, manifesting in passive-aggressive comments about friends' children pursuing what she considered serious careers. Eventually, they relented, but their conditional support came laced with constant reminders of their disapproval. They covered my tuition, yet ensured I understood the perceived financial burden my experimental phase represented. Every phone call home included questions about whether I'd considered switching majors. After graduating with honors from a top design program, I moved to Boston, determined to validate my chosen path. The geographical distance offered necessary space, allowing me to breathe and build confidence in my decisions. Starting as a junior designer at Merit Creative, I immersed myself in building my career. Each small success felt like a vindication. When I was promoted to senior designer after just 3 years, I called home, excited to share the news, only for my father to respond, "That's nice, but Michael just got accepted to law review." My accomplishments consistently seemed to coincide with one of Michael's milestones, leaving mine perpetually paling in comparison. Still, I persevered, finding fulfillment in my work even as family validation remained elusive. Last month's promotion to creative director, at the young age of 28, should have marked the moment they finally acknowledged the validity of my choice. It represented everything I had strived for, placing me in a position held by no one younger before me. I had planned to announce the news in person during Christmas, harboring the perhaps foolish hope that this achievement would finally suffice to earn their respect. The physical distance between Boston and Mapleton gradually morphed into an emotional chasm. Every visit home increasingly felt like stepping into a museum of expectations, where I was the solitary exhibit that didn't belong. I maintained the relationship with dutiful Sunday phone calls and obligatory trips home for major holidays, each interaction draining more energy than the last. 3 years ago, everything shifted when I met Sam at a charity art auction where I had donated a piece. Tall, with kind brown eyes and an easy laugh, Sam was there supporting his sister, a sculptor whose work was featured. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, covering everything from color theory to our shared appreciation for old film noir. Unlike anyone I had dated previously, Sam came from a family that genuinely embraced creativity. His father was a retired English professor who wrote poetry. His mother, a former dancer who now taught at a community center. The first time Sam invited me to a holiday gathering at his parents' home in Connecticut, I felt as though I had stepped into an alternate universe. Their home was vibrant and eclectic, filled with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with artwork, photographs, and mementos from travels. Dinner was not a formal, orchestrated affair with perfect place settings, but a boisterous gathering where everyone pitched in, conversations overlapped, and genuine laughter filled every room. No one inquired about my career prospects or salary. Instead, they wanted to see photos of my recent projects and share stories about their own creative endeavors. The contrast with my own family gatherings was stark and painful. My parents' holiday dinners were meticulously choreographed performances, complete with polished silver, conversation topics as carefully curated as the menu, and an undeniable undercurrent of judgment beneath every interaction. While Sam's family immediately embraced me as one of their own, my last few visits home made it painfully clear the gap between my parents and me was widening. 2 Christmases ago, I presented them with a custom-designed art book showcasing local historical buildings, having spent weeks photographing and illustrating the landmarks my mother held dear through her historical society work. She flipped through it briefly before setting it aside to instead lavish praise on the standard department store tie and cufflinks Michael had purchased for our father. Last Thanksgiving was even worse. Michael announced his engagement to Allison, a woman who seemed almost laboratory created to impress my parents. She was a dental hygienist from a good family with the right connections, taught Sunday school, and chaired the Young Professionals Committee at their church. My mother immediately launched into wedding planning mode, while my father clapped Michael on the back, declaring, "Now that's how you build a proper future." The silent comparison to my choices hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. The final breaking point occurred during a visit 3 months prior. I had flown home for my father's 60th birthday, bringing an original painting I'd created of the lakeside cabin where Michael and I had spent summers growing up. As my father unwrapped it, his expression shifted from anticipation to barely concealed disappointment. "Still drawing pictures for a living, I see," he commented, setting the painting aside without even a thank you. Something inside me snapped. "I don't draw pictures, Dad," I countered, my voice firm. "I'm a professional designer who just led a campaign that increased client revenue by 30%. My work matters." My mother quickly intervened, interrupting with, "Let's not discuss business at a birthday celebration," effectively dismissing both my work and my attempt to defend it. I left the following morning, earlier than planned, and the silence that ensued was punctuated only by Michael's occasional text updates about wedding plans and half-hearted invitations to be more involved. Though he never openly criticized me, his complacency in our parents' behavior felt like its own form of betrayal. I tried to convince myself that the distance was mutual and necessary, but a part of me still yearned for the approval I had sought my entire life. When the promotion to creative director came through, overseeing a team of 15 designers and managing our agency's most prestigious accounts? I thought perhaps this tangible evidence of success might finally bridge the gap. After discussing it with Sam, who had been gently encouraging me to set boundaries with my family, I decided to make one more attempt at connection. This Christmas would be different. I would bring Sam home to meet everyone properly and share my professional achievement in person. The announcement, I reasoned, would be impossible to dismiss, and seeing me with someone who valued and supported my choices might help my parents understand the life I had built. I spent weeks meticulously planning thoughtful gifts. For my father, I commissioned a custom leather portfolio from a renowned artisan, embossed with his monogram and filled with personalized stationery. For my mother, I designed a family tree illustration incorporating historical elements of Mapleton that celebrated her dedication to preserving local history. For Michael and Allison, I created custom wedding invitation designs as an early engagement gift. Most significantly, I hired a well-known local artist, whom my parents had often admired, to paint a portrait of our family home as it appeared in the Historical Society's oldest photographs. I imagined their faces when they unwrapped it, finally seeing my creative connections as valuable. Sam and I arranged time off work, booked flights, and even reserved a rental car, hoping to minimize any inconvenience. I rehearsed announcing my promotion, practicing a tone that conveyed confidence without sounding boastful. 2 weeks before our planned trip, I called my mother to coordinate arrival times and sleeping arrangements. Her voice, when she answered, was already clipped and formal, lacking the forced enthusiasm she typically mustered for our conversations. "Mom, I'm calling about Christmas plans," I began. "Sam and I were thinking we'd arrive on the 23rd if that works for everyone." A lengthy pause followed before she responded. "About that, Emily, your father and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you didn't join us this year." The words didn't register immediately. I thought I had misheard her. "What do you mean?" "What do you mean? We already bought plane tickets." "Well, that was presumptuous, wasn't it?" she retorted, her tone taking on the familiar, disapproving edge that could slice through my confidence like a razor. "You should have checked with us first." "But it's Christmas, and I have news to share," I pressed on. "I was promoted to creative director last month." Rather than congratulations, her response was a dismissive sigh. "Emily, when are you going to get serious about your future? These little design jobs aren't a real career. Your father and I had hoped you'd have outgrown this phase by now." My hand tightened around the phone. "It's not a little design job, Mom. I'm leading the creative department at one of the top firms in the country." "And bringing that young man with you? The one with the artist family? We've heard all about his background from the Thompson's daughter who lives in Boston. He's not exactly the sort of influence that's going to help you find your way back to sensible choices." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had been checking up on Sam through their social network rather than simply asking to know more about the person who made me happy. "Sam is amazing and supportive, which is more than I can say for how you're acting right now." My mother's voice turned ice cold. "That's exactly the attitude problem we're concerned about. Your father and I think you need time to reconsider your priorities. Don't come for Christmas, Emily. We'll just pretend we don't know you until you're ready to be the daughter we raised you to be." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "You're uninviting me from Christmas because you don't approve of my career and boyfriend? We're giving you space to think about what kind of future you really want," she explained. "Michael and Allison will be announcing their wedding date at Christmas dinner, and Reverend Phillips's son will be joining us. He's just finished medical school. That would be a more appropriate connection for you than this artistic crowd you've fallen in with." The implication was crystal clear. I was not welcome in my family home unless I fundamentally changed the life I had built. "So that's it? I'm just cut off?" "The choice is yours, Emily. When you're ready to take a more appropriate path, we'll welcome you back. Until then, it's better this way. Less awkward for everyone." The call ended shortly after, leaving me standing in my apartment, phone still clutched in my hand, feeling as though the floor had vanished beneath me. The carefully wrapped gifts sat in the corner. My excitement about sharing my achievements had been replaced by the most profound rejection I had ever experienced. My own parents had effectively disowned me for the crime of being successful on my own terms. Sam found me an hour later, sitting on the floor surrounded by the Christmas gifts I had so carefully selected. Tears had long since dried on my face, leaving behind a hollow numbness. I had been staring at the wall, replaying not just the conversation, but years of subtle and not so subtle messages that I had never quite measured up. When I finally managed to explain what had happened, Sam's expression shifted from concern to outrage. They can't do this to you. This is emotional blackmail. His protective anger should have been comforting, but it only highlighted the painful reality that my own parents didn't feel that same instinct to protect me. They just did, I whispered, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. And the worst part is, some small part of me isn't even surprised. That night initiated a spiral that threatened everything I had built. Sleep became elusive, replaced by endless mental loops of every criticism, every disappointed look, every time I had tried and failed to earn their approval. I questioned decisions I had been confident about just days before. Was my career truly valid? Was I fooling myself into thinking I had achieved something meaningful? The doubts crept into every corner of my mind. Maybe if I just studied something practical alongside art, I confessed to Sam one night as we lay awake at 3 in the morning. Or if I'd taken that corporate job offer instead of the creative boutique path. Maybe if I dated someone from my hometown. Sam pulled me close. Emily, listen to yourself. You're one of the most talented designers I know. Your clients rave about your work. You were promoted faster than anyone in your company's history. And you're talking about giving that up for people who can't see your value? But rationality couldn't penetrate the deep emotional wound. I had spent 28 years trying to balance being true to myself while desperately seeking my parents' approval. Having to finally confront the impossibility of that equation left me questioning my own identity. The next day, I reluctantly shared what had happened with my closest friend Jessie over coffee. Unlike Sam's measured response, Jessie's reaction was immediate and fierce. Those manipulative, controlling, small-minded. She began before launching into a creative string of descriptions that would have impressed a sailor. Her protective fury momentarily cut through my fog. Who do they think they are? Queen and king of conventional town? This is emotional abuse, Em. You know that, right? I nodded numbly. The validation, while needed, couldn't heal the fundamental wound. I keep thinking, if I just explain it better, if I show them more proof of my success, they'll finally understand. Jessie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Honey, they don't want to understand. They want to control. There's a difference.
Work became both a refuge and a challenge.
The promotion I had been so proud of now came with responsibilities I struggled to focus on. I found myself staring blankly at design briefs, second-guessing concepts I would have confidently presented a week earlier, and zoning out during team meetings. My creative director predecessor had warned me about imposter syndrome, but this was something deeper, an identity crisis triggered by the ultimate rejection from the people whose acceptance I had craved my entire life. Nights were the worst. When Sam fell asleep, I would lie awake, cataloging all my perceived failures and shortcomings through my parents' eyes. I would mentally redesign my life along the path they had wanted, imagining the parallel universe where I was a lawyer engaged to a doctor, living in a suburb near my hometown, attending the right social functions, and receiving my parents' approval. But even in these fantasies, I couldn't imagine being happy. The third sleepless night after the call, around 4 a.m, a realization slowly crystallized as I watched snow falling gently outside our bedroom window. My parents were still controlling me, even from hundreds of miles away. Even after explicitly rejecting me, they were still dictating my emotions, my self-worth, my ability to function. And I was letting them, just like I always had. Something shifted in that moment. Not a dramatic epiphany with triumphant background music like in the movies, but a quiet, stubborn determination taking root. They had made their choice, drawing a line in the sand. Perhaps it was finally time for me to make mine. The following Tuesday, I sat in my therapist, Dr. Chen's office, having called for an emergency session after barely making it through another workday in a fog of anxiety and hurt. The warm, minimalist space had been a sanctuary for the past year as I had begun working through my family dynamics after Sam gently suggested therapy might help with what he called my achievement approval complex. Dr. Chen listened intently as I recounted the phone call and its aftermath, her expression compassionate but unsurprised. "Emily," she said, "we've talked before about your parents' conditional love pattern. This escalation, while painful, fits their established behavior." She leaned forward slightly. "What's different is that they've made explicit what was previously implicit. Their love and acceptance come with terms and conditions." My throat tightened. But cutting me off completely over Christmas. That's beyond just having high expectations. It's a power move, Dr. Chen stated simply. Your independence and success threaten their sense of control. They're escalating because their usual tactics of disapproval aren't working anymore. You're thriving despite not following their blueprint. She guided me through examining the pattern that had defined my relationship with my parents. Their approval as the carrot perpetually dangled but never quite reached. Their disapproval, the stick that had driven so many of my decisions. "Consider this," she suggested toward the end of our session. "What would it look like to stop running the race they've set up, to decide that their approval is simply not a prize you're competing for anymore?" The question lingered as I left her office and walked through the light snow covering Boston Common. For the first time, I truly contemplated the possibility of releasing the desperate need for their validation that had shaped nearly every decision in my life. What would that freedom feel like? That evening, Sam and I sat on our couch with mugs of hot chocolate, Christmas lights twinkling on our modest tree in the corner. The scene was a poignant contrast to the holiday rejection still raw in my mind. "I've been thinking," I said slowly, cradling the warm mug between my hands. "Maybe this is actually an opportunity." Sam raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "I'm listening. All my life, I've been trying to earn love that apparently comes with prerequisites I can never meet. What if, instead of trying to change their minds about me, I focus on creating the kind of Christmas that actually reflects who I am and what I value?" As I spoke, the idea took clearer shape. Christmas has always been this performance at my parents' house. The right clothes, the right conversations, walking on eggshells to avoid criticism. What if we created something completely different? Something authentic and meaningful? Sam's smile widened. "What exactly are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet, but something that uses my skills for good. Something that creates connection instead of judgment." That night, instead of ruminating on rejection, I found myself researching community organizations in Boston. A local news article caught my attention. The Riverside Community Arts Center was struggling to stay open after budget cuts. They primarily served children from low-income neighborhoods, providing arts education that was being eliminated from public schools. Their holiday program had been canceled due to lack of funds, disappointing dozens of families who relied on their services. At 3 in the morning, I sat upright in bed, the full concept crystallizing with such clarity that I couldn't wait until morning to sketch it out. I carefully slipped out from under Sam's arm and padded to my home office, turning on the desk lamp and beginning to outline a plan. By sunrise, I had pages of notes and preliminary designs for Create Christmas, a community celebration of art and connection. The vision was an interactive holiday art event where children could create pieces alongside professional artists, culminating in a gallery exhibition of their work. It would provide the arts exposure the kids were missing. create beautiful holiday memories, and potentially raise awareness and funds for the struggling center. When Sam found me surrounded by sketches and notes, my eyes tired but bright with purpose, he recognized the creative fire that had been missing since the phone call with my mother. "You look like yourself again," he said, kissing the top of my head. "So, instead of going to your parents' house for Christmas," I finished, "we bring Christmas to people who will actually value it." And in the process, I stopped letting my parents dictate what the holidays, or my life, should look like. For the first time in days, I felt the heaviness lifting from my chest, replaced by something I'd almost forgotten: genuine excitement. This wasn't about spite or revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative and using my rejection as a catalyst for creating something meaningful. The path forward wasn't about earning my parents' approval anymore. It was about finally, truly approving of myself. The next morning, I contacted Sofia Mendes, the director of the Riverside Community Arts Center, to pitch my idea. Her initial skepticism quickly gave way to cautious excitement as I outlined what I envisioned. "This sounds amazing, Emily, but I have to be honest. We have no budget for something like this. We can barely keep the lights on through January." I smiled, feeling more confident than I had in weeks. "That's where my connections come in. I just need your space and your trust." That afternoon, I created a project brief, just as I would for any client at work. But this campaign was personal. I started reaching out to vendors, suppliers, and fellow artists I had connected with throughout my career. The response was overwhelming. Companies that normally required months of advance booking made exceptions when they heard the story. Design colleagues volunteered their services. Local restaurants offered to cater. Even my firm's printing partner agreed to produce all materials at cost. Sam threw himself into the project with characteristic enthusiasm, leveraging his connections in the local art community to secure donations of supplies and commitments from respected artists to participate. His sister Julia, the sculptor whose exhibit had brought us together, immediately offered to lead a clay ornament workshop for the children. My friend Jessie, who worked in PR, created a social media strategy and began reaching out to local press contacts. "This is going to be bigger than you planned," she warned me with a grin after securing interest from Boston's largest lifestyle magazine. "Are you ready for that?" The question gave me pause. Originally, I'd envisioned an intimate community event, but it was clearly evolving into something more significant. Did I want this to become public enough that my parents might hear about it? After brief consideration, I realized that visibility was actually aligned with my goal of reclaiming my narrative. "Let it grow," I told Jessie. "This isn't about hiding. It's about creating something meaningful on my own terms." As momentum built, I realized I needed to contact Michael. Despite his complicity in our parents' behavior, he was still my brother, and he deserved to hear from me directly before potentially learning about my alternative Christmas plans through family channels. Our phone conversation was awkward and strained. "What's going on, Em?" he asked. "Mom said you decided not to come home for Christmas because you're too busy with work." The missing pieces in her story weren't surprising, but they still stung. "That's not what happened, Michael. Mom told me not to come. She explicitly uninvited me because she doesn't approve of my career or my relationship with Sam." Silence stretched between us before he responded. "That doesn't sound right. Why would she do that?" "Because I'm not following the life plan they created for me," I explained. "Because I'm building a life that makes me happy instead of the one they wanted." I recounted the full conversation, hearing his sharp intake of breath when I quoted our mother's "pretend we don't know you" comment. "I had no idea," he said finally, his voice smaller than I'd heard it since we were kids. "They told everyone you couldn't make it because of a big work project. They even seemed sad about it." The revelation that they were actively creating a false narrative to save face wasn't shocking, but it clarified my next step. "Michael, I'm sending Christmas cards to the extended family. Not to call Mom and Dad out, but because I want everyone to know they're welcome at the event I'm organizing in Boston. including you and Allison. I described the community art celebration, hearing the conflict in his silence. I don't know, Em. If I show up there instead of being at their house, then you'd be supporting your sister, I finished. But I understand if that's not a choice you're willing to make. We all have to decide what we can live with. After ending the call, I designed formal holiday cards for our extended family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, explaining my new Christmas plans and extending an open invitation to the event. The cards were beautiful, professionally printed on premium stock with original artwork I'd created specifically for the occasion. I was careful to frame everything positively, making no mention of being uninvited from the family gathering. Instead, I focused on the joy of creating a meaningful holiday experience for children who might otherwise go without. As the event gained traction, the inevitable happened. My parents caught wind of it. Apparently, multiple relatives had called asking about the wonderful community event I was organizing, wondering why my parents hadn't mentioned it. My father's voicemail was terse. Emily, what exactly are you telling people about Christmas? Call us immediately. I didn't. Instead, I focused on finalizing details for an event that had grown far beyond my initial vision. With less than 2 weeks until Christmas, every day brought new developments and challenges, but also a growing sense of purpose that had been missing from previous holidays. For the first time, Christmas wasn't about performing adequacy for my parents. It was about creating something authentic that reflected my actual values. Just as everything seemed to be falling into place, our first major crisis hit. 5 days before the event, Sophia called in a panic. The building inspector just came through. They're citing code violations we can't possibly fix before your event. We need sprinkler system updates that would take weeks and thousands of dollars we don't have. My stomach dropped. All our planning, all the momentum we'd built, derailed by infrastructure issues we couldn't have anticipated. After the initial shock wore off, I began calling every venue I could think of. But with Christmas just days away, finding an available space large enough seemed impossible. Desperate, I approached my boss, Claire, the next morning, initially just seeking advice. To my surprise, she offered an unexpected solution. Use our space, she said, gesturing to Merit Creative's open concept office with its gallery-like white walls and polished concrete floors. We're closed from the 23rd through the 27th anyway. It's actually perfect for what you're describing. Her generosity left me momentarily speechless. Are you sure? This is a personal project, not company business. Claire smiled. Emily, what you're doing embodies everything our agency values about creative community engagement. In fact, she added, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her desk, I'd like to offer more than just the space. Let's make Merit an official sponsor. We'll cover the remaining costs and have our social team document the event. This is exactly the kind of community initiative we should be supporting. With the venue crisis resolved, I was riding high until Jessie called with news that shifted the scope again. The Boston Herald wants to do a feature story on the event, she announced. They're interested in the creative professionals giving back angle, especially during the holidays. My hesitation must have been audible, because she quickly added, this could be huge for the community center, Em. The kind of publicity that translates to donations and ongoing support. She was right, of course. This had always been about more than my personal holiday plans. It was about creating something meaningful for the community center and the children it served. Still, the increased visibility brought anxiety about my parents, potentially seeing the coverage. After discussing it with Sam and Dr. Chen, I made the decision to embrace the publicity. If they see it, they see it, I told Sam that evening. I'm done hiding or diminishing my work to make them comfortable. The next complication arrived in the form of a call from Michael. Mom and Dad are freaking out, he said without preamble. Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob told them they're skipping the family dinner to attend your art event. Then Grandma Ruth called to say the same thing. Dad's telling everyone you're trying to deliberately sabotage their Christmas. The accusation was so backward, it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. I invited family to an event I'm organizing because I'm not welcome at the family dinner. How exactly is that sabotage? Michael sighed. I know it's ridiculous, but they've convinced themselves you're doing this to spite them. Mom tried calling you again. To apologize for uninviting me? The silence answered my question. That's what I thought. She wants to criticize my choice to do something positive with my rejection, not to withdraw the rejection itself. After hanging up, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from my mother and a text that read, "Your behavior is causing a family rift. Call immediately." I set the phone aside without responding, focusing instead on final preparations for the event. I was done engaging with their manipulation tactics. The following evening, as Sam and I finalized the layout for the children's gallery display, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Emily. This is Grandma Ruth." My father's mother's warm, slightly raspy voice was instantly recognizable, despite our infrequent contact. At 82, she rarely left Michigan anymore, making her call even more surprising. "I hope you don't mind me calling. Michael gave me your number." "Of course not," I said, genuinely pleased to hear from her. "I was sorry to hear you won't be at the family Christmas," she continued, "although I understand why, more than you might realize." Her words caught me off guard. "Your father didn't tell you much about my relationship with your grandfather, did he?" When I confirmed he hadn't, she sighed. "History repeats itself, child. Your grandfather had very specific ideas about what made a proper life. When your father chose law, he was following the path laid out for him. I chose differently and paid a price for it." I had never heard this family history before. "What choice did you make, Grandma?" "I wanted to be a photographer, had some talent too. But creative pursuits weren't considered appropriate for a doctor's daughter in my day." The parallel to my own situation was striking. What happened? I gave it up to keep the peace, became the wife and mother I was expected to be. I don't regret my family, but I do regret surrendering my passion so easily. Her voice strengthened. "That's why I'll be at your event, not their dinner. Some of us need to break the cycle, Emily." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, processing this new context for my family's dynamics. The rejection I had experienced wasn't just about me. It was part of a generational pattern, one that Grandma Ruth was acknowledging and, in her own way, at 82 years old, finally resisting. Her support meant more than she could possibly know, adding another layer of purpose to what we were creating. That night, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, which turned out to be from Allison, my brother's fiancée. "Michael showed me your Christmas card. The event sounds wonderful. We both wish we could be there." It wasn't explicit support, but the message conveyed what she couldn't directly say, that she recognized the injustice of the situation. These small connections with family members who saw through my parents' narrative provided unexpected comfort as we entered the final days of preparation. December 23rd arrived with swirling snow that blanketed Boston in picture-perfect holiday scenery. I had barely slept, running through mental checklists and contingency plans until Sam had gently insisted I at least try to rest. By 7 that morning, we were at the Merit Creative office, transforming the sleek professional space into a winter wonderland of creativity. Volunteers from the community center arrived with Sophia, helping us set up activity stations, a refreshment area, and the gallery space where children's finished artwork would be displayed. By 9:30, everything was ready. Easels with fresh canvases, clay modeling stations, collage materials in festive colors, and a digital design area where kids could create art using professional software. The professional artists we'd recruited were setting up their demonstrations, and the caterers were arranging beautiful holiday treats. When the doors opened at 10 a.m., I held my breath, irrationally afraid no one would come. My fear proved unfounded as families began streaming in. First a trickle, then a steady flow that filled the space with excited voices and laughter. Children's faces lit up as they moved from station to station, creating holiday cards, ornaments, paintings, and digital designs. The professional artists were wonderful, treating each child's creative efforts with genuine respect and encouragement. "This is amazing," Sophia whispered as we watched a renowned sculptor patiently helping a 7-year-old shape clay. "Some of these kids have never held a paintbrush before, and they're getting guidance from Boston's top artists." Around noon, I spotted a familiar figure by the entrance. My boss, Claire, accompanied by several board members from our firm. "Hope you don't mind us crashing," she said. "When I told the board what you'd organized, they wanted to see for themselves." The board chair, a normally serious man in his 60s, was beaming as he watched the activities. "This is exactly the kind of community engagement we want Merit to be known for. Exceptional work, Emily." His praise was gratifying, but even more meaningful was seeing my professional colleagues witnessing a different side of my capabilities. Throughout the afternoon, I kept one eye on the door, wondering if any family members would actually show up. Around 2 o'clock, my question was answered when Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob arrived, followed shortly by 2 cousins with their children. Their warm hugs and genuine interest in the event contrasted sharply with my parents' rejection. "This is wonderful, Emily," Aunt Linda said, looking around with obvious admiration. "Such a creative way to celebrate the season." The most emotional moment came when I spotted Grandma Ruth being helped through the door by my father's younger brother, Uncle James. At 82, she had traveled all the way from Michigan, choosing my event over my parents' dinner. When she hugged me, she whispered, "I'm exactly where I should be, sweetheart." The local news crew arrived at 3 o'clock, filming the children's activities and interviewing Sophia about the community center's mission. When they asked to speak with me as the event organizer, I briefly panicked, knowing the coverage would likely reach my parents. With a deep breath, I stepped forward and spoke candidly about wanting to create a meaningful holiday celebration that highlighted the importance of arts education and community connection. Just as the interview concluded, a commotion at the entrance caught my attention. Michael and Allison stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking uncertain but determined. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I feared they had come to criticize or create conflict. Instead, Michael gave a small, apologetic smile and a shrug that spoke volumes. They had chosen to come, knowing what it might cost them with our parents. As the event reached its culmination, the children gathered to present their artwork in the gallery section we'd created. Parents and community members moved through the display, admiring each piece with genuine appreciation. Watching their proud faces as they explained their creative choices was more fulfilling than any family dinner I'd ever attended. Impulsively, I stepped up to address the gathered crowd, something I hadn't planned, but suddenly felt necessary. "Thank you all for making this day so special," I began, finding my voice stronger than expected. "The holidays are about finding meaning and connection, sometimes in unexpected places. Today, I found both in this room, watching creativity build bridges between people who might never have met otherwise. Every child is an artist at heart, just waiting for someone to take their vision seriously. Thank you for being those people today." The applause was warm and genuine, filling the space with affirmation I hadn't realized I needed. As people began mingling again, Sophia approached with tears in her eyes. The Herald reporter told me they've already received calls from readers wanting to donate to the center. This could literally save our programs. That alone made everything worthwhile. As the crowd thinned around 5, I was helping a small girl put the finishing touches on her painting when Sam appeared at my side, his expression a mixture of concern and warning. "Emily," he said quietly, "your parents are here?" My head snapped up to see my mother and father standing just inside the entrance, looking simultaneously out of place and imposing in their formal winter coats. My heart hammered in my chest as I excused myself from the little artist and made my way across the room, feeling like I was moving through molasses. Whatever came next, I was determined to protect the joyful atmosphere we'd created. This confrontation wouldn't overshadow what we'd accomplished today. The moment stretched between us. Me in paint-splattered jeans and an oversized sweater. Them impeccably dressed as though attending a formal dinner rather than an art event for children. My father spoke first, his voice lower than usual. Your grandmother refused to come to Christmas Eve dinner unless we came to see this event of yours first. Not exactly a warm opening, but I appreciated his honesty about their motivation. Well, you're here now, I replied, working to keep my tone even. Would you like to look around? My mother's eyes darted to where Michael and Allison were helping children with a collage project, betraying her surprise at their presence. I see you've managed to divide the family quite effectively, she said, the familiar disapproving edge creeping into her voice. Before I could respond, Grandma Ruth appeared at my side, her small frame somehow commanding, as she addressed her son and daughter-in-law. Margaret, Robert, I'm glad you came. Now you can see for yourselves what your daughter has created instead of making assumptions. Her presence gave me courage I might not have found otherwise. Mom, Dad, this event isn't about dividing anyone. It's about creating something meaningful. After being told I wasn't welcome at home, my father's expression shifted slightly, discomfort flickering across his features. Your mother was upset. Perhaps things were said in the heat of the moment that were stronger than intended. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from him that they might have been wrong. Would you like to see what we've done here? I offered, deciding to focus on the present, rather than relitigating the painful phone call. Surprisingly, they agreed to a tour. As we moved through the space, I explained each station and introduced them to Sophia, who spoke eloquently about how the event was already generating much-needed support for the community center. I watched my father's expression as Sophia mentioned the Boston Herald coverage and the corporate sponsorships we'd secured. Despite himself, I could see his grudging recognition that I'd accomplished something significant. Your company supported this? He asked, noticing the Merit Creative logo on some of the materials. My boss offered our space and became our primary sponsor when she saw what we were creating, I explained. She brought our board members today. They were impressed. This detail seemed to register with him in a way that my personal achievement hadn't. Meanwhile, my mother had stopped to watch a young girl proudly showing her grandmother the painting she'd created. Something in the interaction seemed to touch her, softening her rigid posture slightly. As we completed our circuit of the room, Grandma Ruth excused herself to rest in a chair near the refreshments, leaving the three of us in an awkward triangle of unresolved tension. The children seemed to be enjoying themselves. My mother finally offered, the closest thing to a compliment I was likely to get. The whole point, I replied, creating joy and meaning, not just following traditions because they're expected. My father cleared his throat. Your grandmother tells me she wanted to be a photographer. Did you know that? I shook my head. She only told me recently. She said she gave it up because it wasn't considered appropriate. I never knew that about my own mother, he said quietly. And for a brief moment, I glimpsed the weight of generational patterns that had shaped all of us. After they left to attend their Christmas Eve dinner, without Grandma Ruth, who insisted on staying for the remainder of my event, I felt strangely peaceful. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apologies, or profound acceptance of my choices. But something had shifted, however slightly. They had seen me in my element, creating something meaningful through the very talents and choices they had dismissed. Whether that would change anything long-term remained to be seen. As the event wound down, volunteers helped clean up while children left clutching their artwork and parents expressed heartfelt gratitude. Michael and Allison approached me as Sam and I were packing up the last of the supplies. What you did here was incredible, Em, Michael said, genuine admiration in his voice. I should have stood up for you more over the years. We both should have. Allison added, surprising me with her candor. Your parents' version of events never quite rang true. Their acknowledgement meant more than I could express in that moment. The healing process wouldn't happen overnight, but small steps toward authenticity felt like the right direction. That evening, a small group gathered at our apartment. Sam, Grandma Ruth, Sophia, Jesse, and a few close friends who had helped make the event possible. We shared takeout Chinese food, drank mulled wine, and celebrated what we'd accomplished. The community center received over $15,000 in donations today, Sophia announced, tears welling in her eyes. And 3 local businesses have offered ongoing sponsorships. You didn't just give us a beautiful event, Emily. You might have saved our programs. As conversation flowed around me, I found myself reflecting on the journey from that devastating phone call to this moment of genuine connection and purpose. The rejection that had initially broken me had ultimately freed me from the impossible quest for approval I had been pursuing my entire life. You okay? Sam asked quietly, noticing my momentary abstraction from the festivities. Yeah, I said, smiling at the people gathered in our home. I think I finally understand that I can't control whether my parents ever truly accept my choices, but I can decide what kind of life I want to create and who I want in it. Grandma Ruth raised her glass in a toast. To finding your own path, even when it isn't the one others have mapped out for you. Sometimes, the journey you choose for yourself leads to exactly where you're meant to be. As we clinked glasses, I realized this Christmas had given me something no family dinner ever had: the freedom to define success, family, and belonging on my own terms. The art celebration wasn't a one-time event, but the beginning of an annual tradition, one built around creativity, inclusion, and genuine connection, rather than obligation and judgment. In letting go of what I couldn't change, my parents' approval, I had found something more valuable: self-acceptance and the courage to create meaning exactly where I was.